Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 10th episode of Halls of Horror. I am your host, True Crime Stories, and as always, it's good to see everybody here. Last stream, we started the famous or infamous, I'm not sure which one you want to use for it, creepypasta. I am a search and rescue officer for the U.S. Forest Services. We got through part 1 through 4, and tonight we're going to finish up with parts 5 through 8. This probably will go by a bit faster than the other one because some of the last parts are shorter. But regardless, this should be quite interesting. Now, I'm going to start with part 5. And as I did last time, I'll just read everything out and then give my take on what I'm seeing or what I'm reading as I go. For some reason, I'm not seeing the chat. Weird. It's all right. Let us begin. Part 5. I apologize for the short update, guys. Things have gotten a little crazy around here, and I'm not sure how often I'll be able to update going forward. I really appreciate all the support you guys have given me, and while I only have a couple stories to share with you, I'll be interested to see what you think. A firefighter who was helping us at training op told me about a call he'd gone on, supposedly to help rescue a kid from an absolutely massive tree. He said they didn't give him details, just that they needed him to come out and help because they lacked the proper equipment. He'd been called out specifically because this thing was so huge that the SARs didn't feel safe trying to climb it, meaning search and rescue officers. He'd been a tree trimmer before joining the VFD, so it was easy enough for him to grab his whole equipment and come help out. He was let out about 2 miles, and the team stopped at one of the biggest trees in the area and pointed up. He laughed and asked the op captain how the kid had gotten up there, made some joke about the old cat in a tree thing, but Captain just shook his head and told him to get up there and get the kid down. He said he knew something was up, but he didn't push it. He said that as he climbed this tree, he started wondering if they were playing a prank on him. There was no way this kid should have been able to climb this fucking thing. It was massive at the base. About halfway up, it started tapering, and I almost had to turn back a few times because I really didn't think it was gonna hold me. But he said he kept going. And when he was just about at the top, he saw a flash of blue in the branches. I saw the kid's shirt sort of caught in a branch, and I called out to him and told him to come near me if he could, but he didn't say anything. I kept moving, calling the kid's name and telling him not to be scared, that I was there to help him. By the time I got to him, I knew he wasn't going to answer me. I found him, or what was left of him, cradled in the fork of a branch. And the fact that he was up there was sheer luck. If he'd fallen any other way, he'd probably have come crashing down. It wouldn't have mattered, though, because the kid was dead long before he ended up in the tree. I don't know who put him there, or how, or why, but it was fucking sick. The kid's intestines had popped out of his mouth, and they were hanging in the branches. It was like some sick fucking Christmas tree. The way they were draped all over everything. I got a better look and saw that they had popped out of his ass. His guts were hanging out to the bottom of his pants. Ugh! Blech. Not only are his guts coming out of his fucking mouth, but his butt. Ugh. Fucking. Ugh. His eyes were gone, I assume shoved out from wherever source caused him to fucking pop like a stress ball. You ever seen a body this out? Ever seen a body that's been floating in the water for a long time? How their toes kind of swell up and stick out? He was like that. I remember because there were flies crawling all over it. I think it must have gone into shock because, man, I just pushed that kid down with a stick I broke off a branch. Just kind of poked him until he fell. I don't know why I did that. I almost lost my job because of that. But man, the thought of hauling the kid down over my shoulder the whole way, gathering his guts up and coiling them around me like a rope so they didn't snag. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't be able to do it either. That's pretty fucking gross. I've seen a lot of dead kids. More than I'd ever admit. I've seen a kid who hid in a full bathtub during a house fire, boiled him alive, turned him into literal soup. But this, I don't know what did this. But the thought of touching the kid's body made me feel like I was going to lose my mind. I heard him hit the ground, and I figured everyone would freak out. But they knew he was dead when they set me up there. They didn't say anything, but they didn't shout or freak out or anything. I got to the bottom, and I started to get up in the captain's face, asking him who he thought he was sending me up there, and they knew damn well the kid was dead. But he just told me it was none of my business, none of my concern, and thanked me for getting the evidence down. I remember he said that. I remember it specifically because it was so weird to hear it phrased that way. The evidence. Yeah, I think that was fucking weird too. Like he wasn't even a person. Like he'd never been a little kid who got lost and had something fucking even unspeakable happen to him. The captain had a crew lead me back out of the woods, but he and 2 others stayed behind, and I thought that was kind of weird. Why wouldn't they have helped me get the kid out? I tried asking, but the guys leading me out just told me that they couldn't discuss out in the open. They couldn't discuss an open case. I asked him what he thought had happened to the kid, and he got really pensive and thought about it for a bit. I would have said crush injury, based on how the guts came out like that. But with those injuries, you see a massive contusions under the skin. Obvious trauma. This wasn't like that. It was almost like the kid got caught in a vacuum and had his guts sucked out. But even then, there was no trauma. None at all. It bothers me, man. It bothers the hell out of me. Yeah, it would bother me too. Like, someone calls you out, has you climb over a big fucking tree. You see a kid, you're expecting to see a kid alive. And then you see this. A dead kid with his eyes gone and his guts coming out of both sides of his body, or both ends of his body. No. Fuck no. Let's not do that. One of the vets at the training ops reads No Sleep, and he recognized my stories. He knows me pretty well, and we've swapped stories before. He asked if he could share something he's noticed about the stairs, and some thoughts he had. I'm really glad you decided to share these. I think it's important that people be aware of what's out there, especially since the Forest Service is doing such a good job covering it all up. I asked him what he meant. What do you mean, what do I mean? The lack of any kind of media attention, no coverage of missing kids, or bodies found miles from where they got lost in the first place? David Paulides hit this right on the head. The Forest Service is doing everything they can to keep people from coming here, even if it isn't safe. I mean, to be fair, it's not like these things have happened every day. But the numbers add up, and it's worth looking into, especially the stairs. I was surprised you didn't mention the flipped ones. I didn't know what he was talking about. I couldn't remember him ever talking about something like that. He seemed somewhat incredulous. Dude, I can't believe you've been on this long without seeing them. No one told you about them? I shrugged and asked him to elaborate. Hold on. If anybody's talking in chat, I can't see it for some reason. I'm going to refresh my page. Hopefully it doesn't kill the stream. Okay, there we go. I can see everybody. Yay! Hi Taps, hi Sheep, hi Internet Nerd, welcome. Sorry I couldn't see it before. It was saying that I didn't have a connection. Hopefully it didn't fucking die in the middle of it. Alright, where was I? I shrugged and asked him to elaborate. Well, there's the normal stairs, the ones that pop up when we're out of ways. I know you know about them, but sometimes I've run across ones that are flipped upside down. I guess it would be like if you had a dollhouse and the stairs were a separate piece. Now take that, flip it upside down, so the top step is stuck in the dirt, and put it out in the woods. They're like that. I don't see them as often, but they're odd, to say the least. Makes me think of footage taken after a tornado when homes are all blown apart and random things are left standing, like chimneys and garden walls. Those ones freak me out those ones freak me out more than the normal ones because I can't really write those off easily. I don't scare very easily, like most of us who work out here. But that idea stuck with me, and it bothers me. I'm going to try and find more out about them. He also mentioned how people were bothered by the guy with no face. He got really excited and told me he's seen something similar. I was out on a training exercise a few years ago. I was camped out in my tent, and I heard someone walking around outside the camp. We're told not to wander far, so I wondered if maybe it was a rookie who'd gotten up to pee and couldn't find his way back. Remember that guy in our group a few years back who almost fell off the damn mountain? Well, I'm paranoid about that happening again. So I got up to see what was going on. I went to the edge of the camp and I called to whoever it was and told them that camp was this way. But they kept going back out into the woods, so I went after them. I knew it was stupid, but I was half asleep and I just really didn't want to deal with some idiot getting hurt. I followed this thing on a dead straight course for about a mile, and then it stopped on the edge of a little river. I could see the outline of it because the water was reflecting the moon, and it looked just like an ordinary guy. He had a pack on, and it looked like he was facing me. I asked if he was okay, if he needed help, and he cocked his head like he didn't understand me. I always have my pocket knife on me, and it's got a little thumb light attached to it, so I turned that on and lit up his chest, so I wouldn't blind him. He was breathing slow and deep, so I wondered if he was sleepwalking. I went closer and asked him again if he was okay. I moved the light up, and something didn't seem right, so I stopped. He kept breathing in this real slow, deep breaths, and I sort of figured out gradually that's what was bothering me. It was like he was pretending to breathe, not actually doing it. His breaths were too even and deep, and all his movements were exaggerated, like his shoulders going up and his chest moving. I told him to identify himself, and he made a muffled noise. I moved the light up, and I shit you not, the guy had no face, just smooth skin. I freaked out and sort of fumbled my light, but I saw him move towards me, but he didn't actually move. I don't know how to explain it, but 1 second he was at the edge of the river, and the next he was 5 feet from me. I never looked away or blinked. It was like he moved it so fast my brain couldn't keep up. I tripped and fell on my ass, and I could see this line open up in his throat. It stretched up to his ears, and his head tilted back, and he smiled at me with his throat. There was no blood, just this gaping dark hole, and I swear he smiled at me with this gash in his throat. I got up and I ran as fast as I could back to camp. I would too. I could hear him following me, but I feel like he was always right behind me, even though when I looked back I couldn't see him. I calmed down when I got to camp. The fire was still going, and I guess that pack mentality of being with other people made me stop and breathe a little. I waited by the fire to see if he followed me there, but I didn't hear anything else for a few hours, so I went back to bed. I know it sounds weird, but the whole thing was just so surreal. It was almost like I immediately wrote it off as my imagination. Yeah, probably a skinwalker. Probably. I would not doubt it. Those guys are fucking freaky. I'll have to go over them at some point. We were telling ghost stories one night before bed just to scare each other and poke fun at whoever got creeped out. Most of the time it's the rookies, but one woman told a story that actually managed to get under my skin a little bit. And I know the same was true for others. She said it was true, but then again, every ghost story told around a campfire is true. Somehow, though, I don't think she was making it up. It had that ring of truth that only really traumatizing events have. She said that when she was a kid, she and her friend used to go out in the woods behind her house a lot. Ooh, this is the one that freaks me out the most. Ooh, 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 yes. She lived in northern Maine, and there was a lot of dense, unpopulated national forest. She says the woods up there aren't like they are here. They're so thick in places that the trees block out the sun almost completely. She and her friend grew up there, so they weren't scared of being out there alone, but they did always maintain a sense of caution in certain areas. She said it was never really talked about, but they always knew not to go more than a mile or two beyond their homes. The adults never said why, but it was an unspoken rule that no one ventured out that far. She and her friends made up stories about bears as big as houses that lived out there, and they used to scare each other by hiding and making growling noises while the other searched for them. Yeah, that one is pretty fucking crazy, but this one is the one that freaks me out the most. She said one summer there was a series of awful storms that blew down a lot of trees and set one part of the forest a few miles behind the house on fire. Fire crews got it under control, but she said some of them came back not quite the same. It was like they'd been to war. You could tell who'd really gotten scared because they had that same look on their faces. I think it was called shell shock. My friend and I said they were like walking dead people. They didn't smile or say anything if you went up to them, and most of them left town as soon as everything was over. I asked my parents about it, but they said they didn't know what I was talking about. Once everyone was told the woods were safe again, my friend and I decided to try and hike out to where the fire had been. Excuse me. Wrong. We didn't tell our parents where we were going, and it was pretty exciting to think that we were disobeying them like that. We hiked out about 2 miles or so, and we started seeing burnt trees and stuff. I remember my friend getting really upset because we found the skeleton of a deer curled up around the tree, and I practically had to drag her away. She wanted to bury it, but I didn't want her touching it because the antlers were weird. I can't remember why. I just remember thinking that there was something wrong with them, and I didn't want either of us to go near it. The farther we went, the more burnt everything got. Eventually, there were no standing trees, and it was like being on another planet. Almost nothing green, just brown and black everywhere. We were standing there looking at it all, and we both heard someone shouting in the distance. I panicked because I thought it was my dad, and that he was going to tell me I was grounded. My friend broke off and went to hide behind a big rock because she said she didn't want to be caught out here. Her parents had forbidden her to come out in the woods at all, and she lied and told them we were going to a movie. I followed her, and she kept silent. I could hear the voice getting closer, and I realized they were calling for help. I thought maybe it was some hiker who'd gotten lost and needed directions back to town. That used to happen all the time, so I was used to helping people out. I heard him following my voice, so I kept calling out until I saw him running in the distance. He got closer, and I could see that his face was all red. I told my friend to give me her pack, because she had a first aid kit. She made a noise like she was grossed out, and she asked if I saw his face. I told her to shut up, and I jogged up to meet him. I stopped about halfway, and when he stopped in front of me, I could see that his nose and lips and part of his forehead were gone. It was like they'd been sliced clean off. He was bleeding bad, and I saw that the knees of his pants were red too. I took a step back, but I was too scared to move much, and he grabbed my shoulders. I felt like I got a shock and jerked back, and he jerked back. He started babbling, and I couldn't tell what he was saying except that he kept asking how long he'd been gone. He asked me where his unit was, but I just shook my head. He looked me over, and he saw my Walkman, and he screamed. He just kept babbling and touching his face, and I realized he wasn't wearing the right clothing. He had some kind of weird gray cloth jacket and almost formal pants on. And the jacket had these weird buttons and red borders on it. I kept shaking my head and I told him I didn't understand what he was saying. I went to open the first aid kit, but he just screamed again and said the only thing I could really understand. Don't touch me. You'll make me go back there. After that, he ran off, and I could hear him screaming the whole time. When I couldn't hear him anymore, I turned around and my friend was crying. I just turned around and started walking back towards town. She asked me over and over what had happened and who that was, but I didn't say anything. When we got home, I told her I didn't want to play in the woods with her anymore. We're still friends, but we don't talk about that guy. Not ever. I'll update as soon as I'm able, guys. I appreciate the continued support. No, that's Confederate, I think. The Union was blue. So I think he was a Confederate soldier. And that's still fucking creepy on every level. Part 6. Yeah, the rest of these are really short, so it probably won't be that long of a stream. Regardless, I'm having a little bit of fun, and I enjoy these. Part 6. It's been way too long since I posted an update, and I'm sorry about that. There's also been some confusion about the new formatting requirements on the board, which I've cleared up. So these next few stories are going to be posted a little differently. They'll be in chronological order, and I'll do my best to tie them into each other as much as I can so it doesn't skip around too much. When I started out as a rookie, no one had told me a lot about the job in terms of weird things that could happen. I'm assuming that was largely to prevent me from freaking out and abandoning the park. But a few months into my service, when I was still a rookie, a friend and I were drunk at a party, and we both opened up a bit. Yeah, I can get a little crazy out there, I guess. I think the worst are the ones where people die and when they just shouldn't, you know? Or when we find them dead, like 10 minutes after someone says they saw them last. They were fine when I passed them on the switchback, I swear. That sort of shit. Like, take this guy who I found one spring put on a really popular trail. Out on a really popular trail. Someone comes to the VC freaking about some guy who's lying in the middle of a path in this giant pool of blood. We ran out there and we find this dead guy, dead as a doornail, which he absolutely should be because the back of his head is like mashed potatoes. The skull is decimated, brains are leaking out like custard filling, and the guy's old, so you figure, yeah, he probably fell and hit his head. Old people fall all the time, it's no big deal. Except this area where he fell doesn't have any big rocks. There's not even any stumps or big branches, and on top of that, there's no blood trail. So he clearly died where he dropped. Now, that's when you'd turn to murder, but there were people just out of line of sight of the guy. If someone came up behind him and murdered him, there's no way someone wouldn't have heard. And again, even if someone had, there'd be a blood trail. Spatter all over the place. But everyone on the scene said it looked exactly like he'd fallen and smashed his head on a rock. So what the fuck did he hit his head on? And then there's this lady I found in a different park, like about 5 years ago. Back when I was upstate. We found her in the middle of a stand of big junipers, curled around a trunk, like she was hugging it. We pick her up to move her, and a fucking waterfall comes out of her mouth, splashes all over my shoes. Her clothes are dry, and her hair is dry. With the amount of water in her lungs and stomach was phenomenal. Unreal, man. Coroner's report says the cause of death was drowning. Her lungs were completely full of water. This, even though we were in the middle of a high desert, and there isn't a body of water for miles. No puddles, no nothing. No signs of anyone else being out there. I mean, yeah, it's possible they were murdered. But why go out of the way to do it like that? Why not just stab them and be done with it? I don't know, it's weird to me. Yeah, it's weird with me, too. Like, how the fuck did number one, this guy, who looks like he's just been bashed over the head, end up in the middle of, like, the forest, with people within eyesight, and, there's no rocks anywhere to bash his head on. Like, how did somebody not see it? And then the lady, like, Dude. She's puking water on this guy, but is completely fucking dry otherwise. How the fuck does that even happen? That's so fucking surreal. I'd be like, holy shit. And being unsettled because of those two incidences, by far. Like, there's no question. I'd be freaking out and trying to figure out what the fuck was going on. Now, of course, that freaked me out a little. But we were wasted, and I guess I sort of wrote it off as a fluke. I also assumed there was exaggeration there, since, we were wasted. Now, I don't like talking about this next case very much. It was an awful one that I'd done my best to forget about. But of course, that's easier said than done. This happened about 6 months after the conversation with my friend at the bar, and up until that point, I had a lot of really weird shit go down. Ooh, excuse me, not ladylike. A few things here and there, and of course the stares, but it's amazingly easy to get used to stuff like that when it's treated as if it's normal. This case was different. Oh, I hate this. I hate the story. This story usually makes me cry. A guy with Down syndrome in his 20s went missing after his family lost sight of him on a major path. That was odd in and of itself, because the guy never left his mom's side. She was absolutely convinced he'd been kidnapped, and unfortunately a ranger who isn't with the park anymore insinuated that no one was going to kidnap someone, well, with that kind of disability. Not very tactful, to say the least. We wasted a lot of time trying to calm her down enough to get information about him, and then we put out an official missing persons call. Because of the urgency of the situation, him being mostly unable to function alone, we had local police come in and help us. We didn't find him the first night, which was heartbreaking. None of us wanted to think of him being alone out there. We assumed he just wandered, and he was staying ahead of us. Hey, what's up, Grim? Thanks for stopping by. It's good to see you. We brought out helis the next day, and they spotted him in a little canyon. I hoped to bring him back up, but he was in a bad shape, and I think we all knew he wasn't gonna make it. He'd fallen and broken his spine, and couldn't feel his lower half. He'd also broken both his legs, one at the femur, and he lost a lot of blood. He was confused and scared while he was alone, so he'd probably exacerbated the injuries by dragging himself a little ways. I know it sounds awful, but while I was riding in the copter with him, I asked him why he wandered off. I just wanted something to tell his mother, to let her know it wasn't her fault, because he was fading fast, and I didn't think she'd get to ask him herself. He was crying, and he said something about how the sad little boy had wanted him to come play. He said the little boy wanted to trade so he could go home. Then he closed his eyes, and when he woke up again, he was in the canyon. I'm not sure that's exactly what he said, but it was what I thought the gist of it was. He kept crying, asking where his mommy was, and I held his hand and tried my best to keep him calm. It was cold out there, he kept saying. It was cold out there. My legs was frozen. I was cold out there. It's cold in me. He was getting even weaker, so he eventually stopped talking, and he closed his eyes for a while. Then, when we were about 5 minutes from the hospital, he looked right at me, with these big tears running down his face, and he said, "Mama won't see me no more. Love Mama. Wish she was here." And he closed his eyes and he just never woke up. It was horrible. I didn't like talking about it. That case was one of the first ones that really rattled me badly. Yeah, I'm tearing up right now just reading that. That gets me every fucking time. Like, he's stammering and you can't understand what he's talking about. You have to kind of summarize what he's saying. And then he gets quiet. And when he wakes up, out of nowhere, he just says, "Mama won't see me no more. Love Mama. Wishes she was here." Like, basically, he knows he's gonna die. And then just dies. That shit gets me. Ooh. Because of how badly it affected me, I reached out to a senior ranger who ended up helping me through it. As time went on, and we got to know each other better, he ended up sharing one of his own stories with me. It was disturbing, but it helped to know that I wasn't the only one affected by the things going on out there. I think this must have happened before you got here, because I think if it had happened while you were here, you would have remembered. I know it didn't end up in the news for some reason, but I think most people who've been here long enough know about it. The park sold off a portion of the land to a logging company, and it was a really controversial thing. But it wasn't that large or old of a plot. And it was right after the recession. So we needed the cash. Anyway, they were felling this plot of land. And we get a call that we needed to get our supervisor out right away. I don't know why, but they ended up sending me and a few other guys along with the heads. I guess for the power in numbers to see what's up. We got there and all these guys were crowded around a tree they've just cut down. They're pissed off and freaking out, and the foreman comes over and says he wants to know what we think we're up to. What the hell y'all think this is? Some kind of joke? You've got a lot of fucking nerve pulling this shit. We bought this land fair and square. Well, we don't know what the fuck he's talking about. So he brings us over to his felled tree and points at it and tells us that when they cut it down, it was just like this. And they'll be damned if they put it in there. If they put it there. The inside of the tree was all rotted out and hollow at one spot. And when they cut it down, it exposed that chamber. And inside it was a hand. Like a perfectly severed hand. And looks like it's actually fused to the inside of the tree. Well, now we think they're putting on a joke. So we tell them that we don't like being fucked with. And we start to leave. But they tell us they've already called the cops. And that they'll go right to the media if we don't stick around. Well, that gets the head's attention. So they stick around and talk to the police about it. Everyone's denying they put the hand in there. And besides, how would anyone have done that? It's clearly a real hand. But it's not mummified or skeletal. It's brand new, probably not even a day old. And it's definitely fused with the wood. You can see that it's coming right out of it. The loggers, they insist they didn't put it there. Somehow, this fresh human hand ended up fused to the inside of the living tree. The cops have them cut up the section of the tree into a movable chunk. Then they take the hand away, and the area is closed off. There was a pretty big investigation, but I know they didn't find any answers. Now it's become a legend, and as far as I know, we haven't sold any more property for logging. That's insane. Like, imagine cutting open a tree, and there's this perfectly, new human fucking hand fused to the inside of that tree. Did somebody throw a body in it at some point? And if they did, it wouldn't be that fresh. It wouldn't look like it's just a day old. That doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't. Fuck. As you all know, I went to a training seminar recently and heard some amazing and horrible things there. One of the guys I talked to while I was there told me a story when we were all around the campfire one night. We were both pretty drunk. You'll see a pattern here. And we were swapping stories. He told me this one. Me and another guy were out on a field search because some campers reported screaming noises at night. So we head out there to look for whatever fucking mountain lion was wandering into the area, and I'm pissed. We've had 3 of them show up in the camping areas that year alone, and I'm getting tired as hell of constantly having to deal with them. Plus, I just don't like them anyway. They're a pain in the ass, and they're loud, and they scare the shit out of me. Fucking cats, pieces of shit. I'm groaning about it to the guy I'm with, and he thinks it's a real fucking riot. So we're seeing all these broken branches and what looked like dens, and we're pretty sure we know where the thing is. I call in, and they tell me to confirm if possible, which just means they want you to step in a big pile of shit and use that as proof. I'm not seeing any, though, so I basically tell them to shove it, I'm done. We know that damn thing's out here somewhere, even if I'm not stepping in its shit or inside its mouth or whatever. Guy I'm with wanders off to take a piss or whatever, And I stay behind watching this little burrow under a tree to see if maybe a fox or something is living under it. Because I love foxes, man. They're cute as hell. But anyway, I'm watching this tree and I start hearing branches crackling. And it's coming from the direction where my partner went opposite of. Now I've got my pistol. But you and I both know that's not gonna do shit against this cat. I cock it and holler at my partner to get his dumbass back. But he's too far. And he can't hear me. I stand up and get my sights on where the thing is approaching. And I shit you not, man, I just about peed myself. This guy is coming towards me. And he's backflipping through the fucking woods. Like, instead of walking, he's doing these crazy fucking backflips. And I swear to God, he cleared every fucking log and bush in his path. It was like he knew right where he was going. I yell at the guy to stop where he is, that I'm pointing a gun at him, and he keeps coming. And I just kind of lost it. I shot at the ground in front of him, and it was a dumb fucking thing to do, but man, I didn't want this guy anywhere near me. When I fired, he was about 50 yards from me, and as soon as the gun goes off, he whirls around and goes off, backflipping back into the woods. My partner hears my gun go off and runs back and asks what's up. And I tell him there's some fucking weirdo out here, hopped up on God knows what, and we need to get the hell out of Dodge. I let the cops know what happened, and I didn't get in any trouble for firing, but man, I don't know what that motherfucker was on, but I've never seen anything like that before. Shit was absolutely butt-fuck crazy. Yeah, some weird man is doing backflips through the fucking woods, and, like, it just doesn't make any... How is he clearing all this shit? Doing backflips. Full-on backflips. The fuck. I think we can agree that there's stuff going on out there in the woods. And while I'm not going to spout off about what it could be, or offer any theories, what I want people to take away from all this shit is that it's so damn important to be safe when you're out there. I know a lot of you think you're invincible, but the fact is that you can die out there, or be hurt, or go missing. It's easier than you'd ever imagine. I apologize for this relatively short update, guys. I will do my absolute best to continue the series as soon as possible. Thanks for all your support. It means the world to me. We only got 2 parts left, but dude, you've got mountain lion shit going on. And when you go to check it out, this dude's backflipping through the woods. Thank you for the subscribe, Aragon. I really appreciate it. Gotta love when people come to the fam. Like, but backflipping through the fucking woods, number 1. Oh, yeah, it's getting really weird already, yeah, Remy. It just gets weirder. It's like, what the fuck is happening? And I'm just glad we got out of that one story of the autistic kid that died in the helicopter ride. Because that just fucking, that does me in, man. So far we've got Bear Man, Goat Man, dude backflipping through the woods, kid being found up in a fucking cliff, or multiple kids being found in fucking weird areas, a hand in a tree, and what else? Like, the amount of shit that just comes out of here is just so fucking wild. Wow. Alright, let's continue with part 7, because we got 2 parts left. One of the topics that I get asked about a lot, here and in real life, involve things like the Rake, the Wendigo, and other related legends. Yeah, the KD ones do sound pretty plausible. You can actually imagine that happening, and it's kind of crazy. I can't honestly say that I know a lot about many of them, but based on some light reading I did, I can say that I've heard stories that seem to be loosely related to them. Yes, let's get into the Wendigo stories. You've heard the old adage that legends like to come from somewhere, and I'm sure that's true, but as you all know, I do try to take things with a grain of salt. You have to out here. It's sort of like working in a hospital, I'd imagine. You could spend all day thinking about how many people have died there, and how there are probably ghosts, or whatever you want to call them, all over the place. But it doesn't do you any good. It just makes it harder to do your job. I think a lot of us feel that way, and that's why we try just go about our work like everything is fine. Once you get paranoid, there's not really any going back, and a lot of cadets quit because of it. My parks especially seems to have a high turnover rate because the cadets graduate and get so freaked out about everything and they can't seem to let it go. You have to learn to internalize things and shut off. Here's the Katie. I've talked to Katie a bit about her experience because I wanted to know what she thought about the Wendigo. She didn't really have anything in particular to say about it aside from that she didn't want to think about it that much. But she told me a friend of hers had had something similar happen. I contacted this person, H, over Skype, and they agreed to talk to me a bit. They're aware of my work here, and they're fine with me posting the story exactly as they wrote it. I grew up in Central Oregon, and there's a reservation called Warm Springs about 2 or so hours away from where I live. I only mention that because a lot of people in my area have friends there, and a lot of the land in that area belongs to that tribe. Excuse me. When I was a kid, we used to go camping up there. Not on the res, of course, but in that area. Excuse me, Jesus, sorry. And I met a lot of kids who grew up there. I got to know one kid really well. His name was Nolan, and we ended up hanging out a lot when our families were in the area. Our folks got to know each other, so we'd all get in touch and camp out around the same time. We camped for about 2 weeks, so we were out there for a long time. I asked him if he camped in an RV. Yeah, my dad had one, so I guess it wasn't really camping, but we'd take our tents and stuff and set them up out away from camp most nights. I didn't like sleeping in there because I didn't like sleeping there because I like being outside. We talked for a bit about camping. So anyway, sorry. One year Nolan and I were out there. I think must have been like 12 or so. We wanted to go out and camp near the river because we wanted to try night fishing. Night fishing is fun, by the way. I have a good time doing that. I think we must have been about a third of a mile from the main camp. Yeah, it was Katie's friend. Yeah. That's an easy thing to misconstrue or forget. Far enough away that we couldn't hear or see anyone else. I remember that. We were messing around most of the day. I don't really remember much about it. But we ended up building a fire at some point, and I was really impressed because he had this flint or something that he used to start it. I'd never seen anyone do that before, so I thought it was pretty cool. I got him to teach me how to do it as we lit some stuff on fire, which looking back was really stupid because it was in the middle of the fucking summer, and if I remember right, the fire warning was either at yellow or orange. But thankfully, we didn't start anything major, and when it got dark, we sat around and talked about whatever it was 12-year-olds talked about. I don't really remember. What I do remember is that at some point, he looked over my shoulder at the river and asked if I could see something. The way our camp was set up, we were about 10 feet from the river, and we were at the widest point, so it was probably about 20 feet to the other bank. It gets hot up there in the summer, but the water's still cold, which is important. I look over my shoulder and I could see something waiting in the water on the other side. From where we were, it looked like a deer, but we couldn't really tell because of the fire. I got up and looked closer, and I saw a pair of antlers, so I figured it was a buck. But I thought it was weird that it was wading into the water, and it was definitely heading for us. And I asked Nolan what he thought we should do. He's looking at the fire with this weird expression, and he tells me to sit down and shut up. So I do, because I'd never seen him act this way before. He's whispering at me to ignore it, and to just keep talking like we were, but I couldn't think of anything to say. He was saying something about an episode of some show, but I could hear the deer coming through the water, so I wasn't really paying attention, and I kept trying to see over his shoulder, but every time I did, he sort of hit me on the arm to make me look at him. I wasn't really scared, I remember. I was just sort of confused. But then I hear the deer coming out of the water, and I could kind of make out what it looked like, and I realized it wasn't a deer because whatever it was walking on 2 legs. I started to get up. I was super freaked out, but Nolan just yanked me back down and talked louder about the television show. And I could tell he was just as scared as I was, probably even more. He leaned in and poked the fire with a stick, and he whispered that whatever I do, I can't speak to it. I could see it come closer, and it stood right behind Nolan's back. It was about ready to pee my pants, and I think I'd probably have run if I'd been alone. But I didn't want to leave Nolan, so I kept sitting really still and sneaking glances at it. It wasn't that tall, but the way it carried itself was wrong. Like its center of balance was screwed up. I can't really describe it, but it was kind of like it kept shifting too far forward. It just stood there behind Nolan for a long time, and eventually Nolan ran out of things to say. We just kind of sat there for a second. The fire was making noise, but I thought I could hear this thing talking in a low, really low voice. I couldn't hear what it was saying, and I leaned forward a tiny little bit. And I did actually pee my pants when I leaned forward, too. I couldn't see its face, but I saw its eyes. Yeah, this has got Wendigo written all over it. Either Wendigo or Skinwalker. That just fucking written all over that shit. They were cloudy and milky, and if you want to know what they looked like, find that scene from Lord of the Rings where Frodo falls in that lake, and all the dead people are floating towards him. That's what the eyes looked like. So all I saw were those two white eyes floating above Nolan's head, and the real vague shape of some antlers coming out of his head. I don't know what my face looked like, but at exactly the same time, Nolan and I fucking booked it out of there. And we ran non-stop until we got back to the main camp. My pants were soaked with pee. I would have peed too. I'm not gonna get at this kid and make fun of him for that. I would have pissed myself too. So I took them off as we were running and threw them in the bushes. We both stopped once we were in front of my dad's RV, and we couldn't see anything chasing us, so we stood there and caught our breath. I asked him what that thing was, but he said he didn't know. He said his grandpa had only warned him that if anything ever came up to him when he was out in the desert, he was never, ever supposed to talk to it or listen to anything it had to say. I want to know if he'd heard it talking too. And he said that the only thing he'd been able to understand was help you. I think we ended up sleeping in the RV with my parents, and the next night we went back out and didn't see anything. Yeah! I'd be pretty fucking scared too. That does remind me in a lot of ways of the Wendigo legend. There's a phrase used to describe it that I think fits perfectly, which is that the Wendigo is the spirit of the lonely places. I know sometimes when I'm out in the wilds where I know there's no one around me for miles and miles, I get this weird kind of craving that I can't really explain. I don't know if it happens to anyone else, but it's the desire to consume. It's not like I crave anything in particular, but more of this weird, distracting hunger that comes from every part of my gut. That's weird. I also wanted to find out about the Faceless Man, if I was able, and found a few similar things. I asked around my circle of friends, and one of them said when he was out doing repairs at a park in his area, he saw something kind of like that. We were having dinner in town, 5 of us including myself. This guy, he was repainting an information booth and heard a man asking for directions to the nearest campsite. He didn't turn around because he was up on a ladder, but he informed the man that there weren't any campsites nearby, but that if he headed down the road for about 4 miles, he'd find one at another park. He asked if he could be of any other help, and the man said no, and thanked him. My friend said he was painting, but he was listening, and never heard the man leave. The second the man came up and talked to me, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. But I wasn't sure why. I just had this really uneasy feeling about the whole thing, and I wanted to finish painting and get out of there. Figured maybe part of it was that I couldn't turn around and look at him, but something just felt off. Yeah, this one gives me goosebumps too. There was also this weird smell floating around even before the guy talked to me. Kind of like old period blood. As a woman, I could smell that, and that's not a good smell at all. I had looked around to see what was causing, but I didn't find anything. So I waited for the guy to walk away, but I didn't hear him leave, which made me think he was just standing there and watching me. So I asked again if I could do anything for him, but he didn't answer. I knew he was there, though, because I hadn't heard him leave, so I did this awkward turn on the ladder to look down and see what he was doing. Now, I admit it could have just been my brain fucking up, but I swear to you, Russ, for a split second when I turned around, the fucker didn't have a face. Like, he had no face. It was almost concave, totally smooth, and I just about had a fucking heart attack because I couldn't even wrap my brain around what I was seeing. I think I started to say something, but there was this kind of pop inside my head, and suddenly he was just a normal looking guy. I must have looked weird because he asked me if I was okay, and I was just like, yeah, I'm fine. He asked about the campsite again, and I point where he has to go. And he's like, I'm not from around here, can you help me get there? Now, this is when I knew something was really up. There's no way this guy got out here and didn't know where he was. And for that matter, there's no car around. So how did he get there in the first place? I asked that question too. I said I was sorry, but I couldn't take him anywhere in a company vehicle. And he was like, please, I really don't know where I am. Can you come with me and help me get there? So now I'm seriously weirded out. And I start wondering if this is some kind of ambush or whatever. I told him I could call him a taxi to come out and take him where he wants to go. And I pull up my phone and he just goes no. And walks away really quickly. But he doesn't walk out of the park. He walks back into the fucking trees. And I got right in my fucking truck and started to get out of there. Fuck the pain or whatever. I looked in my mirror to see where he was as I was leaving, and he was standing right at the tree line. I don't know how he got there so fast. But this time, I know the fucker didn't have a face. He was just watching me leave. And right before I turned the corner, he took a big step back into the trees and kind of dissolved, I guess. Maybe it was just dark, so he blended it in. But it felt more like he just melted away. I don't like that. I don't like it at all. Nope. Don't like it. Nope. Interestingly, right after this guy finished the story, someone else piped up with another one, but with a slightly different twist. You know, actually, I had some sort of weird something weird like that happen a while back. I was doing some trail scouting, and I was out in the middle of nowhere, figuring out where we were gonna have this trail run through. Hey, what's up, Mike? I hadn't seen anyone else for probably a good 2 hours, and I wasn't really paying attention to where I was going. I was just looking at the ground for the most part. Then out of nowhere, I crested this little hill and almost ran into this guy. He was older, probably in his 60s, and I started to apologize to him for running into him, and then I noticed his face. And it probably looked like a complete douchebag because I stopped and just stared at him. It took me a second to figure out what was wrong, but this guy's face was huge. I know it sounds kind of weird, but that's the only way I can describe it. His head wasn't big or anything. It was normal. But the amount of space his face took up was just way too much. That's kind of weird describing it. I don't really know how to picture that. Like, if you took someone's face and enlarged it all about 10 times, it doesn't say anything. Weird. Hopefully that didn't stop for you guys. He doesn't say anything, he just looks at me, and I backed up and was kind of stuttering, saying I was sorry, and I went around him and fucking got out of there and did what I needed to do. The whole time, I kept looking behind me because I was so freaked out that he'd pop up behind me or something. I know it sounds ridiculous, but I swear to you, it was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. I switched the topic to the stairs a little later, and there was a definite shift in enthusiasm. No one spoke up first. There was a real stigma around discussing them, even when you're away from work. But I broke the ice with the story of my own, and the guy who told the story about the faceless man told this one, albeit quietly. A couple years ago, I was camping with my girlfriend, and we're out about 2 miles from the road at this site I know. We went to bed that night, but we couldn't sleep because someone interjected a funny comment, and we were dangerously close to going off on another subject, but I got us back on track. Yeah, really funny, you fucker. No, it was because we kept hearing that grinding noise. My brother used to grind his teeth in his sleep, and it kind of reminds me of that. My girlfriend was freaking out, but I just kept telling her to ignore it, because I've heard it before, and you just didn't have to ignore it. It goes away eventually. You guys know what I mean. We all knew what he meant. So eventually I got her to go to sleep, but I woke up probably 2 hours later because something was just off. I rolled over and she wasn't there, and I kind of freaked out because... Buzz. Sorry, that was my phone. He thought for a second, and then he took a very long drink. Anyway, I ran out of the tent calling her name, but I didn't have to go far. She was standing at the edge of the camp, looking at something in the trees, and I could see that she was really pale. The fire was low, but bright enough to see her. Anyway, so I ran up to see what was going on, and she was dead asleep, but her eyes were open. She had this real spaced out look, so I put my arm around her and let her back, but she wouldn't move. She just said really quietly something like, "I have to go now, Eddie. I have to go. It's here." Huh? The foot? I don't like that. I was like, "You're sleepwalking. Come back to bed." But she wouldn't budge. She just kept standing there and saying she had to go. And I looked at where she was looking, and there was a fucking staircase right there about 15 yards away. Gray one, concrete. And she started to walk towards it, but I yanked her back, and that woke her up. She looked at me like I was a fucking out of my mind, and she asked what the fuck she was doing out of the tent. I didn't tell her anything. I just told her she was sleepwalking. The grinding was gone, so she just went back to the tent with me and fell asleep again. I don't know. I don't like thinking about it, We all knew. I wouldn't want to think about it either. Like, I don't want to appear like a fucking staircase, an evil staircase crawling out to my girlfriend or whatever and telling her to come climb me. No. You guys remember that kid with, I can't remember what it was, some kind of brain fuck up? Not Downs, but something like that. Oh, that's a really good way to put it, dude. Really. Someone else brought up. Well, I got to read the report he gave when they found him a week after he went missing, and it was fucked up beyond belief. I mean, you have to take it with a grain of salt, because who knows what that kid actually thinks is real. But some of this stuff, I don't think he could have made it up. Like what? Well, first of all, he talked about the stairs. He said he'd been watching his dad build a fire, and the stairs came up to him, and he had to go up them or something bad would happen. The cops couldn't really understand what he was talking about after that, because he just kept saying, "like the campfire," over and over. And he kept mentioning sounds, but he couldn't say what sounds, just that it was loud, and he covered his ears so he couldn't hear them. But the thing I remember most is that they asked him where exactly he'd gone, and he just said he was right there. He kept pointing at himself. And they said they thought that meant that he thought he'd never left. That's really hard to say. Try to say that 5 times fast. He said he wasn't scared because the stairs were there, and they said they talked to him. And he said they talked to him. But not like people talk. Like I said, it was really convoluted and hard to understand, and I have a feeling the cops didn't take most of it down. They ended up just saying the kid had some kind of amnesia or fugue. I don't know what the fuck that means. Fugue. And that they didn't think foul play was involved. Doesn't really explain why he came back a week later perfectly fine without a speck of dirt on him and well fed. But hey, what the cops say goes. Kid fucking poofed because the stairs came to get him. I don't like it. There's still a lot of questions I want to answer. I'll continue to ask around and find out whatever I can. The next update should be soon. Thanks for being patient. You can also find me on Tumblr at searchandrescuewoods.tumblr.com. I'm not going to go to that. Not happening. Fuck Tumblr. And this is the final update. And he says that to begin with. This will be my final update for now. Things have deteriorated here to a degree that I didn't foresee. I didn't know how much writing about the things that are happening out here would affect every single part of my life, and maybe that's what's stupid of me. But I should have considered it more seriously. But honestly, I just thought I was writing about things that a few people would want to hear. I didn't think it would get this much attention. People ask me about the stairs now. It doesn't happen every day. But when it does happen, I never really know what to say. My bosses know someone is talking about them, and I'm sure that if they know, the higher-ups know. And I can tell you that they aren't happy about it. I've been formally told that I am not to speak a word about them to anyone anymore, which is part of the reason this has to be my final update. I can understand that. I can't risk my job for this, as much as it's been wonderful to get a lot of these things off my mind. I still do love my work, and I need to be out there. If anything, my being aware of what's really going on is enough reason to stick it out. I may not be able to tell people that they're out there, but if I see them, I can direct traffic away to somewhere safer. Because of the amount of attention these stories have gotten, I've heard a lot of stories being swapped back and forth. I've heard so many I can't even remember most of them. The ones I do remember are the ones that I wish I could forget. One story that's made the rounds here was about a young woman who disappeared upstate. Initially, everyone assumed she was a runaway. She didn't come from a great home life, and so it really wasn't any kind of surprise that she'd choose to cut and run. But people started coming forward saying that they'd seen her around the park shortly before she vanished. So some of the rangers in the area were sent out to make sure she hadn't hung herself or something on any of the back trails. I took them a while, but they didn't find her. Well, not all of her. Just half of her tongue and a quarter of her lower jaw. Very clean cuts from what I've heard. They've never found the rest of her. Fuck! So you're looking for somebody, and you search in the woods. You've seen them in the woods prior, and they just disappear. And the only thing you find is someone's tongue and part of their lower jaw. And it's clean cut. That stinks of foul play to me, and I don't like it. It stinks so heavily of foul play. So many stories about children, so many of them going missing and turning up in caves, wedged in between impossibly tight spaces. So many of them found on mountain peaks, or at the bottoms of sheer gullies. Missing shoes, missing socks, or found with both in perfect condition despite them being miles and miles away from where they vanished. So many stories of black-eyed people wandering around the woods calling out in the night, mimicking the sound of running water or a bobcat screaming. One man in particular goes to every news station he thinks will listen to him and tells the same story. He was deer hunting, had camped out in a very remote area, and woke up because something was scraping against his tent. He thought it was a raccoon or a fox until the thing pressed its face against the door of the tent, at which point he could very clearly make out a human nose and mouth. He kicked at it, but it leaped back and was gone by the time he opened the tent flap, gun at his side. He fired 2 warning shots, and when the sound faded, he heard a snap behind him. A man was standing at the edge of the campsite. This man was not wearing any clothing, but he also didn't possess any kind of human flesh. As this hunter described it, the man was some kind of amalgamation of raw meat and hair. As if someone had scooped up roadkill and molded it into a vague shape of a man. The face was lumpy and only a rough approximation of a human face. The thing opened its lopsided mouth, and from it came a sound of a gun, the gun the gun the hunter had fired. That's a Wendigo. Oh, that's a Wendigo. It did this twice before mimicking the sound of the tent zipper and fleeing into the night. Fuck that. Fuck all of that. Fuck all of that. All of it. A young couple out for a hike in the rocky areas of my park reported yesterday that they had seen something strange on the peak I'm very familiar with. Ooh, I like this one. This one's fucking weird. They were taking turns looking through a pair of binoculars when the man noticed a hiker climbing up a very steep part of the cliff face. He watched the man scale the slope, and it didn't occur to him until the incident was over that this person had no climbing gear. When the climber reached the top of the peak, which was about 5 miles away, right of them, was 5 miles away, they turned and faced the young man. He said whoever or whatever this person was looking right at them. The climber waved in an exaggerated manner before snapping in half at the waist sideways and leaping off the peak. The young man didn't see where the climber landed. I sent them on their way with assurances that I'd check it out. I lied. I won't be turning in a report because there are 10 others exactly like it. The climber is well known in that area. I don't question it anymore. I wouldn't either. I don't want to know what that is. Like, you're looking at binoculars 5 miles away from you. You see somebody climbing without climbing gear in an area that's really fucking steep that you would need climbing gear for. And, they just look directly fucking at you while you're looking at them in binoculars. Snap and to the side at the waist and jump off. No. Just no. There are so many things I won't ever be able to understand about my job, and it would take me years to relate all of those things I've heard in the past few months. When I feel like my job is in jeopardy, I will come back. When my job isn't in jeopardy, I will come back. It may be a different format, but I will come back. Thank you for sticking by my side and enjoying the things I've talked about. If you go out into the woods, I encourage you to be safe. Bring water, food, and survival equipment. Let people know where you're going and when you'll be back. Don't go on uncharted paths unless you know exactly what you're doing. And above all, don't touch them. Don't look at them. Don't go up them. Apparently, on an edit, it's saying that there's a book in the works. I don't know when that edit was made. There's a second one. Search and rescue Tumblr.com. Okay, fine. I'll take a look. Fine. So, there's no posts. I went to that exact Tumblr site that was on there, and there's nothing on it. So, if anything, I can do some research into this and see if there's anything else that has to do with it. But I don't really know what to make of that. It looks like there's a lot of stories that have been put in the comments to these, but that's all of it so far. I don't see anything on a book, but I'll look into it and I'll update you guys on the next stream. But that's it for the creepypasta. Next week, I'm going to have something a little bit special, and it's something that was brought up to me in Twitter DMs. I think it would be really cool, and if you guys want to get in on it, you can DM me on Twitter or Discord, probably. But I am going to do a stream on what I think the perfect serial killer would be and how they would go about committing their crimes or their murders. So, next week is what a perfect serial killer would look like. And that's going to be fun. I'm going to look at a lot of different people that I know of that have gotten away with a lot of that stuff, that have attributes I believe are needed to be that kind of person. But we will see what happens, and I'm definitely going to have that as a call-in show. So, if you want to be involved, please keep an eye out. I will definitely be adding people to the server. And I am more than happy to have people on give me their take. So with that, thank you for coming by. Thank you for hanging out. And sweet nightmares.